The world runs on energy, shaping global politics. From gasoline to electricity, energy is the lifeblood of modern civilization. But this vital resource is not distributed equally, creating a web of dependency. The key players are the United States, Russia, and India, yet their roles are changing dramatically. The current global landscape is defined by a delicate balance. The conflict in Ukraine and Western sanctions on Russia have profoundly reshaped energy flows. Decisions made in Washington, Moscow, and New Delhi will shape the future world order for decades to come. Russia's energy market position is one of immense power, leveraging vast oil and gas reserves to fuel its economy and influence abroad. However, reliance on energy exports has proven a double-edged sword. Sanctions and supply cuts have pushed Europe to diversify while Russia pivots eastward to new buyers in Asia. India's story in the 21st century is one of remarkable growth and transformation. With a population now exceeding 1.4 billion people and a rapidly expanding economy, the nation's demand for energy is skyrocketing. India is currently the world's third-largest consumer of energy, and its needs are projected to grow faster than any other country over the next 2 decades. This immense appetite is driven by increasing industrialization, urbanization, and a rising middle class that is buying more cars, appliances, and air conditioners. Powering this growth is the central challenge for Indian policymakers, making energy security a top national priority. Unlike the United States or Russia, India is an energy importing nation. It possesses limited domestic reserves of oil and natural gas, forcing it to rely heavily on foreign suppliers. Statistics paint a stark picture. India imports over 85% of its crude oil and around 50% of its natural gas requirements. This high level of import dependency makes the Indian economy extremely vulnerable to global energy price volatility and geopolitical instability in oil-producing regions, particularly the Middle East. A sudden spike in oil prices can strain the government's budget, fuel inflation, and slow down economic growth, impacting the lives of hundreds of millions of people. In response to this vulnerability, India has adopted a pragmatic and multi-pronged energy strategy. The primary goal is to secure a stable and affordable supply of energy from a diverse range of sources. This has led India to cultivate strong energy partnerships with a wide array of countries, from Saudi Arabia and Iraq in the Middle East to the United States and, more recently, Russia. The Indian government has actively encouraged its state-owned energy companies to acquire stakes in overseas oil and gas fields, a strategy known as equity oil, to hedge against market fluctuations and ensure a physical supply of energy. This approach is purely transactional, driven by national interest rather than political alignment. This quest for energy security explains India's position on Russian sanctions. While Western nations sought to isolate Moscow, India saw an opportunity to secure its energy needs at a lower cost. When Russian Urals crude was offered at a significant discount, India dramatically increased its imports, moving from purchasing less than 2% of its oil from Russia before 2022 to over 35% by mid-2023. For New Delhi, this was not a political statement in support of Russia, but a pragmatic economic decision. It was a move to cushion its population from soaring global energy prices and maintain its economic growth trajectory, asserting its right to act in its own sovereign interest on the world stage. When Russian forces crossed into Ukraine, the United States and its allies responded with economic sanctions. The goal was to cripple Russia's ability to finance its military aggression by targeting its vast energy sector. The strategy was simple: stop the flow of money from oil and gas sales into the Kremlin's coffers, starve the war machine. The US, European Union, and their G7 partners aimed to sever this financial lifeline, imposing bans and targeting financial institutions. This was a way to demonstrate resolve and impose a tangible penalty. This delicate balancing act would prove to be immensely challenging. For the European Union, sanctioning Russian energy came at a tremendous cost. For decades, the continent had built its energy security on cheap Russian gas and oil. As Europe weaned itself off Russian supplies, energy prices skyrocketed. Natural gas prices soared, threatening deindustrialization. Governments spent billions to subsidize energy bills and prevent economic collapse. The invasion of Ukraine shattered the belief that economic interdependence could foster peace. The EU recognized its energy payments were funding the war. Despite political commitment, decoupling was not absolute. Some pipeline oil deliveries were temporarily exempted. Russian LNG continued to flow into European ports. These loopholes highlighted the difficulty of a clean break. To circumvent Western sanctions, Russia assembled a massive shadow fleet of aging oil tankers. This opaque network transports Russian crude oil to Asia, outside US and EU systems. Tactics like ship-to-ship transfers obscure cargo origin. Ships frequently go dark, disabling tracking systems. This fleet has been an economic lifeline for Russia. Despite bans, Russia's seaborne crude exports remained resilient. Sanctions' economic impact hasn't been as devastating as hoped, highlighting a loophole. The shadow fleet demonstrates that sanctioned goods will find a way to market. Recognizing a full Russian oil embargo was impractical. The G7, EU, and Australia introduced a financial weapon: the price cap. This policy aimed to keep Russian oil flowing, but limit the Kremlin's revenue. Western services could only be used if oil was purchased at or below $60 per barrel. However, the price cap has proven to be an imperfect weapon. Russia adapted by expanding its shadow fleet, operating outside the cap's jurisdiction. Enforcement challenges in the shadow fleet have limited its success, failing to severely cripple Russian revenues. The US and European allies imposed sanctions on Russia, a complex calculation weighing strategic imperatives against economic fallout. The primary driver was upholding national sovereignty, which Russia violated by invading Ukraine. This was complicated by Europe's energy dependence on Russia. The US pushed for sanctions, balancing punishment for Russia with avoiding a global energy crisis. India and China didn't join, prioritizing their economies. This allowed Russia to redirect energy exports, blunting the sanctions' impact. The mixed results highlight the difficulty of using economic tools for geopolitical outcomes in a multipolar world. As India increased Russian oil purchases, a question arose in Western capitals. Should sanctions include countries undermining efforts to isolate Russia? The idea of sanctioning major buyers like India was debated, but the reality made it a non-starter. Sanctioning India would be a monumental error. India is the world's fifth largest economy and its most populous nation. The potential blowback was too high, making it untenable for Washington. Securing affordable energy is a matter of national survival for India. The long-term partnership with India was more valuable. Sanctions could push India closer to Moscow and Beijing, a risk Washington wouldn't take. The decision not to sanction India over Russian oil imports is rooted in the strategic importance of the Indo-Pacific region. For the United States, the primary long-term challenge is the rise of China. India is seen as an indispensable partner. Its geographic location and military make it a critical counterweight to China's ambitions. Alienating India would be a self-inflicted wound. The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, is the most visible manifestation of this partnership. It is a powerful coalition of democracies aimed at balancing China's power. For the US, weakening this partnership would be strategically incoherent. The US needs India to be a strong, capable, and friendly power in the Indo-Pacific. This makes the partnership too big to fail. The US-India relationship is deeply rooted in economic interdependence, not just geopolitics. Hundreds of US companies, from tech giants to defense contractors, operate in India, drawn by its vast market and skilled workforce. Sanctions would disrupt billions in investments, supply chains, and put American firms at a disadvantage against global competitors. The US is India's largest trading partner, with nearly $200 billion in goods and services exchanged in 2023. India is a major buyer of American products and a powerhouse in IT and business services for US corporations. A trade war would raise costs for Americans and disrupt global industries reliant on Indian talent. The American business community lobbies hard to protect this partnership, making sanctions highly unlikely. The economic stakes are simply too high for both sides. Washington knows a prosperous India is good for America. Economic ties are a far more effective tool than sanctions. India's Russian oil purchases reflect its doctrine of strategic autonomy, never a junior partner, always acting in its own interest. India's multi-alignment means it partners with the US, Russia, and others, refusing to pick sides. It deepens security ties with the US through the Quad, while remaining active in China and Russia-led blocs. India buys military hardware from both Russia and the US, seeing no contradiction. This pragmatic approach lets India keep open channels with all major powers and avoid entanglement in their conflicts. On Russian oil, Indian officials are unapologetic, pointing out Europe's own energy imports and India's lower per capita consumption. India's growing economic and military clout lets it resist external pressure as never before. The US and its allies now realize persuasion, not coercion, is the only way to influence India. The Russian oil issue shows India will chart its own course in a complex multipolar world. The US-India partnership is about more than countering China, it's essential for tackling global challenges. India's pharmaceutical industry is vital for global health, as seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. Future pandemic responses will require US-India collaboration in manufacturing and science. On counter-terrorism, both nations share intelligence and conduct joint exercises, leveraging India's unique regional insights. Climate change cooperation is crucial. India's energy choices will shape the world's climate future. The US and India are working together on renewables, green hydrogen, and climate finance. India's participation is indispensable for any global climate solution. The partnership is built on mutual necessity, not just politics. Washington needs India as a full partner in innovation and implementation. India's success in sustainable development is a win for the entire world. The Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, or iCET, marks a new era in US-India collaboration. Launched in 2023, iCET aims to connect defense, academia, and private sectors to co-develop future-defining technologies. It breaks down barriers to tech sharing, streamlining joint research and production. A major focus is building resilient semiconductor supply chains, with US investments in Indian chip facilities. The alliance extends to space, with NASA and ISRO collaborating on joint missions. Defense innovation is another pillar, linking startups to create next-gen military tech. iCET ensures the world's largest democracies set technology standards based on shared values. For the US, partnering with India is a game-changer in the tech race with China. Combining American capital with Indian talent creates an unmatched innovation powerhouse. iCET is a declaration: the future of technology should be built on openness, trust, and democracy. The US-India defense relationship has transformed from buyer-seller to co-producers and strategic partners. US-India defense trade has soared, now exceeding $20 billion and covering everything from aircraft to helicopters. The landmark GE jet engine deal brings advanced manufacturing to India, technology rarely shared even with close allies. This signals deep trust and a commitment to building India's defense industry. Foundational agreements like LMOA and COMSAT enable real-time intelligence sharing and joint operations. Greater military integration boosts regional security and deters adversaries. A strong Indian military helps maintain Indo-Pacific stability, reducing the US security burden. The US is investing in a long-term partner, not just a customer. Defense ties make the partnership resilient, even amid disagreements elsewhere. India's Russian oil purchases have highlighted the need for a stronger US-India energy partnership. The US is now a top supplier of oil and LNG to India, with bilateral energy trade exceeding $20 billion. American LNG helps India diversify away from unstable regions and rivals. Long-term contracts and Indian investment in US export terminals deepen economic interdependence. The partnership is expanding into clean energy, with the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership driving renewables, green hydrogen, and electric vehicles. The US provides technology and finance to help India meet ambitious climate goals. This collaboration is vital for global climate action and economic growth. By being a reliable energy partner, the US strengthens strategic ties and reduces India's reliance on rivals. Energy cooperation turns a potential conflict into a cornerstone of the US-India relationship. Beneath the layers of strategic calculations, defense deals, and trade statistics lies a foundational element of the US-India partnership's shared democratic values. Both nations are vast, diverse, and sometimes, noisy democracies. They're built on the principles of free elections, a rule of law, an independent judiciary, and a vibrant free press. While both countries grapple with their own internal challenges in living up to these ideals perfectly, their fundamental political systems provide a common language and a basis for long-term trust that's just not present in relationships with authoritarian states like China or Russia. This shared identity, honestly, is the unseen bedrock of the partnership. This foundation of common values is crucial in building the high-trust ecosystem required for collaboration in sensitive areas. It's simply easier for the US to share advanced technology, sensitive intelligence, and co-produce defense systems with another democracy. There's an inherent understanding that both governments are ultimately accountable to their people and are bound by a similar set of legal and ethical constraints. This makes India a more predictable and reliable partner for the United States in the long run. The partnership is not merely transactional, it's rooted in a shared belief that a world order governed by democratic principles is safer and more prosperous for everyone. These shared values also create a powerful connection between their people. The Indian diaspora in the United States is one of the most successful and influential immigrant communities. Numbering nearly 5 million, they are prominent in technology, medicine, business, and politics. This vibrant community serves as a living bridge between the two nations, fostering cultural understanding and advocating for stronger ties. This people-to-people connection adds a unique depth and resilience to the relationship, creating a broad base of support that transcends the policies of any single administration in either country. It's a human link that reinforces the strategic alignment. In the global contest of ideas between democracy and autocracy, the partnership between the world's oldest democracy and its largest democracy carries immense symbolic and practical weight. A successful, prosperous, and democratic India is the most powerful refutation of the argument that authoritarianism is a more efficient model for development. For the United States, supporting India's rise is therefore not just a matter of realpolitik, it's an affirmation of its own core values on the world stage. This alignment on fundamental principles is perhaps the most compelling reason why the US needs India, as it provides a durable and meaningful foundation for a partnership designed to shape the 21st century. We are witnessing the redrawing of the global energy map in real time. Russia's pivot to the east, connecting with Beijing and New Delhi, is driven by necessity. This represents a structural change in global energy geography. The US has leverage, supplying Europe as it decouples from Russia. However, the US can't prevent nations like India from making their own deals with Moscow. By mid-2023, Russia became India's largest crude oil supplier. We are moving towards a more divided global energy market, a defining feature of our current era. Sanctions on Russia's energy sector provide a case study on the effectiveness and limitations of economic warfare. The goal was to cripple Russia's ability to fund its war, but the results have been mixed. Sanctions forced Russia to reorient its economy, but failed to deliver a knockout blow. The global oil market proved to be Russia's greatest defense. Sanctions are a blunt instrument with unpredictable consequences. Economic interdependence is a two-way street. This highlights skepticism about broad-based economic sanctions as a primary tool of foreign policy. India's position has been a masterclass in pragmatic foreign policy, guided by its principle of strategic autonomy. Faced with a global energy shock and diplomatic scrutiny, India chose its own national interest. Its decision to increase imports of discounted Russian oil was a pro-India one. Securing energy at the lowest price is a fundamental economic imperative. This was a clear demonstration of India's growing confidence on the world stage. This policy of multi-alignment allowed India to navigate geopolitical currents. The Indian model of strategic autonomy signals a shift towards a more fluid international system. National interest is the primary driver of foreign policy. Despite the clear friction over India's energy trade with Russia, the episode has ultimately reinforced the enduring strategic logic of the US-India partnership. It has demonstrated that the relationship is mature and resilient enough to withstand significant disagreements. The United States, after weighing its options, made a clear strategic choice. The long-term imperative of cultivating India as a major partner far outweighs the short-term frustration over its Russian oil purchases. This calculus is not based on sentiment, but on a cold, hard assessment of American interests in the 21st century. A strong, prosperous, and democratic India is simply too important to alienate. The core of this logic remains the shared challenge of managing a rising and increasingly assertive China. In the grand geopolitical competition unfolding in the Indo-Pacific, India is the indispensable democratic counterweight. Its geography, military potential, and economic scale make it the only nation in the region capable of balancing Chinese power over the long term. This shared strategic interest forms the bedrock of the relationship, compelling both Washington and New Delhi to look past their differences and focus on the bigger picture. The deepening collaboration in defense technology through the iCET and intelligence sharing are all testaments to this powerful converging interest. Furthermore, the partnership is expanding well beyond the China-centric framework. It is evolving into a comprehensive global alliance built on shared challenges and opportunities. The collaboration on clean energy, global health security, counter-terrorism, and democratic standard setting for technology governance illustrates the growing breadth of the relationship. The US needs India's scale and talent to solve these global problems, from manufacturing vaccines to building secure semiconductor supply chains. This interdependence creates a strong, positive-sum logic for cooperation, making the partnership valuable to both sides across a wide spectrum of critical issues that will define the coming decades. This is why the US-India relationship is often called the defining partnership of the 21st century. It is built on a rare combination of shared democratic values, converging strategic interests, and complementary economic strengths. The people-to-people ties, anchored by a successful and influential Indian-American diaspora, provide a unique and durable foundation of social and cultural connection. While the road ahead will undoubtedly feature more disagreements and challenges, the fundamental logic of the partnership remains overwhelmingly strong. Both nations have concluded that they are stronger and more secure together, a realization that will continue to guide their relationship through the complexities of a changing world. Looking forward, the events of the past few years have set the stage for a new and more complex era in global energy and politics. The road ahead will be defined by three major trends that have been accelerated by the Ukraine conflict and the resulting sanctions regime. First is the enduring reality of a multipolar world. The refusal of major powers like India to align with Western sanctions signals a definitive end to the unipolar moment. Global governance will increasingly require consensus building among multiple power centers, each with its own interests and perspectives. For the United States and Europe, this means adapting to a world where their policy preferences are not automatically adopted by all. Second, the quest for energy security will intensify and take on new forms. The painful lesson Europe learned about overdependence on a single supplier will not be forgotten. Nations everywhere will prioritize diversification of their energy sources more than ever before. This will mean not only seeking out a wider range of oil and gas suppliers, but also accelerating the transition to renewable energy. The data shows a massive surge in investment in solar, wind, and green hydrogen as countries seek to build more resilient, domestically controlled energy systems. This energy transition is no longer just a climate imperative. It has become a core component of national security strategy for nations around the globe. Third, the weaponization of economic interdependence through sanctions, tariffs, and export controls is likely to become a more common feature of international relations. However, nations will also become more adept at building defenses against such measures. We can expect to see the continued development of alternative financial systems, non-dollar trade arrangements, and resilient supply chains designed to be sanction-proof. The rise of Russia's shadow fleet is just one example of this adaptive trend. This will create a more fragmented global economy, where strategic blocs may operate with different technological standards and trade rules, complicating global commerce but providing insulation from geopolitical shocks. In this new environment, strategic foresight and pragmatic diplomacy will be more important than ever. The intricate dance between the US, India, and Russia over energy sanctions is a powerful illustration of the challenges and choices that lie ahead. It is a world where nations must constantly balance their values, their economic needs, and their security interests. Navigating this multipolar energy future will require a nuanced understanding of the interconnectedness of our world, an acceptance of its growing complexity, and a commitment to finding pathways for cooperation even in an age of intense competition. The stability and prosperity of the 21st century will depend on it.